Hello everyone. Uh, we'll just start the session. So so just to introduce myself, I am Arjish. I am a sophomore in mechanical engineering department from IIT Madras. So just a few things before we start the session. So in case you have any doubts, just feel free to raise your hand, and Sudeep here will like allow you to unmute yourself and you can ask your doubt. So feel free to stop anytime during the presentation, right? So can just everyone confirm if they're able to see my screen? Probably raise your hand for the
Yes,
doubt.
sir.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So yeah, so we'll just start with why Python, right? So first of all, unlike common programming languages like C++ or Java, Python has a way simpler syntax, and you don't have to do any boilerplates for C++, like C++ and Java for Python. You can just start coding as it is. So if you're already familiar with C++, you would know you have to import your libraries, have your main function, and then start doing stuff, right? You don't have to do that. As Python is an interpreted language, you just give whatever the command that you want to run, and then you can just run it straight away. You don't have to have any prefixed code or something to use Python. So this makes it a lot more simpler to beginners to start Python. And the second main advantage of Python is the number of libraries. So every day there are a lot more libraries that are like being created for the community, and everything is open source. So you can have get access to literally everything that you want to do. And Python is also quite fast, but unlike C++, it's not very like it's not that fast, but it is enough for day-to-day tasks. And basically, these frameworks that I told you, right? They're all open source, so it makes it easy, even easier to use Python, as you can edit them to your liking. Okay, so we'll go over the today's contents. So we'll start with different types of data types, and then move on to conditional statements, followed by loops, functions, classes, and a few libraries for your curiosity, right? So we'll just start with data types. So basically, in every programming language, we have something called variables, and these variables we assign them some property to store, and these variables you can use throughout your code. Basically, in Python, you don't have to specify what that specific data type is. Python automatically classifies it. Unlike C++, where you have to say, let's say you want to declare an integer, right? So you have to say int a equal to 0. In Python, you can just say a equal to 0. So this is one major advantage of Python. You don't have to specify what data type you want to use. And yeah, obviously each data type behaves uniquely. So that is why we have a lot of data types. So we'll just go through one by one, and let's see where it takes us, right? So starting with integers, the most obvious, and the floats, these are all very similar. They're all numerics. So you can do arithmetic operations on these and several others. We'll just go through them in a minute. And you have strings. Strings can be either characters, words, or even sentences, paragraphs, etc. So basically, any text that is coming under the Unicode guidelines, right? And then you have Boolean values, that is either true or false. These will be very useful in terms of conditional statements and loops. And you have sequential data types, like for example, lists, tuples, range, so on. So we'll go through we'll go over them. We'll go over them. Sorry. Okay, sure. So we'll just go through them whenever we go. Can you mute someone? Guys, please don't turn on your microphone, right? It will be very disturbing for the others. Okay, sure. We'll just move on. Okay, so we, okay, so starting with numeric type. So we have integers, right? So it is obvious. We just say x is equal to 10, and then let's see what happens when we type x, right? So when you do print x, what it does is it converts the value that is stored in x and then prints it out. And when you do type of x, it tells you that x is a class of integer, right? So we'll see about classes in this later in this session. But for now, you just assume that class int refers to the integer data type. And then similarly, like Python is smart enough to say find out that 10.58 is actually a floating point. So whenever I run this, it will say my variable y belongs to the class float. Okay. So if now let's for example, let's say I convert this to 10 again. Okay. So now if I rerun it, Python is clever enough to say that this is an integer. So what happens here is the difference between integer and float is not that much for you. You can say 10 is 10.0 and then still call it a floating point. But what happens is whenever your number is stored in the as bits, right? So there is a different way floating points are stored when compared to integers. So these are all for bookkeeping measures. So you don't have to worry about it right now. So as I said, all these arithmetic operators like addition, subtraction, you can perform on integers or floats. So let's look at a few, right? So we have normal addition. It is denoted by the plus character, normal subtraction, a minus character, and so on. So here what happens is we also have two different division operators. One is basically normal division that will give you a floating point, and one is an integer division. So this is something like taking the floor of your quotient. So when you have two backslashes together, you will get an integer instead of your floating point. So for the sake of it, I'll just remove one backslash and then run it again. So here you can see a divided b by b gives a floating point, but when I add two slashes, it just gives me 9. So this is a very useful operator, and it just saves you time. And then you have modulo. This is basically the remainder operator. So when you calculate 56 mod 6, basically we have 4, right? So this is just a remainder operator. And in case of Python, you can also give exponents very easily. So for example, a asterisk 3 will give me the cube of a, and for so square will be a asterisk 2, right? So these exponent operators are very easy to use in Python. You don't have to like run a for loop and then say that for like basically we'll come to for loops later. When we do that, I'll explain to you why the exponent operator in Python is more efficient than a normal for loop, right? So any questions still here? Okay, I think it's just basic stuff. We'll just move on. Okay, so again, probably you would think that these are all integers, right? So we can add them, we can do something. So what happens when you add an integer with a floating pointer? So Python again is clever enough to like figure out that when you add an integer to a floating pointer, the output we get is also a floating pointer. So let's just try it out. So we already defined x to be an integer and y to be a floating pointer, right here. So just let me just rerun this. So when I run this, so you get the value of z, that is the normal sum of x and y, and the type of z, right? So basically type of z is again floating point here. So Python automatically does a type conversion. So this takes place in a hierarchical order. So basically int is at the lower of the list, and then a float is placed higher than int. So when you try to add int and float, the one which is higher data type will be the resulting operator. Sorry, resulting data type. And so usually you have the comparison operators, right? So when you check two numbers are equal or greater than, less than, so on. So these are all the operators that we use. So in Python, when you use just one equal to, that is an assignment operator. So what it does is it takes the value 58 and then it assigns that value to the variable a. So to check whether a is actually 58, we have to use two equal tos. So this is called an equality operator. So this is a comparison operator, right? Similarly, for not equal to, we have a percentage mark followed by an equal to, or you can also use this greater, less than, greater than. So these are all used interchangeably. So prefer this because when you see this, you can automatically get to know that there's an inequality sign. Okay, and you have the normal greater than, or equal to, so on. So we'll just run this and then see if it works, right? So what happens is when you do a equal to b, it gives you a Boolean value. So that is why here it says false. So when clearly when you say 5 equal to 6, that is not true, right? So it gives out you false. Similarly, if a not equal to b, so we get a response true. So we'll come to Booleans in just a bit. So this is basically to check whether number is equal to or not. So these are all the comparison operators that you get. There are few more operators. You have logical operators also. Those we'll get to it when we do conditional statements. Okay. So now coming to strings. Strings are actually very useful. So suppose you want to store a huge sentence in one variable, you don't want to type it out again and again, you use strings. So once again, when we just see what is the type of S, you get a class called str. Str stands for string here. So it doesn't matter when you if you use double quotes or single quotes. Let's just try it out. So here also, so here I have my characters like inside a double quote, and here I have a character inside single quotes. The class is still same string. So let's say, what if you want to have a sentence instead of a word, right? So you could still do that, and you need not store your strings inside a variable. You can just print it out straight away. That is also fine. So now, see, this is pointless to store strings in Python, right? Unless you have some operations that can go with it, right? So basically, you have two operations called string concatenation and one thing called strip and split. Okay, so concatenation is obvious. So it just takes these two strings and then puts it together. So I just do it as s1 plus s2. So when I run this, so you can see that this string is, I mean, the second string is appended to the first string. So even so, let's say I remove the space at the end of this string, right? So what happens is you can see that these two words are actually concatenated together. So this just shows that the concatenation operator literally appends the strings back to back. Okay. Similarly, yeah, you might be curious what could happen when you subtract two strings, right? Can someone guess what could happen? Someone could raise their hand and then let us know. Okay, sure, we'll move on. So as you might have guessed, it is going to throw you an error because it is not a valid operator, right? So yeah, so you can't subtract two strings. So actually, subtracting two strings might have a different meaning. So you can take the union of these two strings, that is addition, and or you can take the intersection of these two strings, right? So you have other string operators such as union and intersection, which does the two operators. I mean, which does the two operations more efficiently. So coming to strip and slip, okay. So what happens is when you have a sentence which is not properly punctuated, okay. So as you can see here, you have a lot of empty space at the end of your string, or you have a lot of empty space at the start of your string. So what should I do when I have if I have to remove these? These are basically dummy characters which you don't want to use, right? So whenever you pass this string to some kind of a function, let's say the function actually is slow with respect to the number of characters in the string. So when you have empty characters, it is not going to do you much, right? So that is when we use a function strip. So when you just put so when you just put strip, right, what will happen is, so you can see the number of characters here, it's quite high. So when I just do s1.strip, it is going to reduce the number of empty spaces at the end. Similarly, s2.strip, so it is just going to reduce the number of empty spaces at the start. So this is just like bookkeeping method, so that the number of bits that this string takes on your cache is less compared to the actual original string. Yeah. So now when you just again there is another function called split, right? So what this does is it just cuts your string into two parts. So if you give a word, if let's say you don't give any argument, so when you do that, it is going to give you word by word. Okay. So the default argument is a space, but instead I want to cut it by the word happens, right? So you can do that, and then it is going to give you two parts, one before happens and the other part of the string that is after happens. So if you want to do this strip to along with this, you can just add strip. So yeah, these are all used interchangeably. Okay. So let's say you want to get these word by word. Okay. So as I said, you can do this also. So this will give you word by word. So now these are all just basic operations that you could do on string, right? So we can't find out whether a word has happens or whether a word has when or something. So that is when we use something called regex. Regex is a text basically a text search tool, you can say, which has a lot of useful like functions that you can use. So basically, it's a library in Python. So you can just import RE. So unlike C++, you have to. So in C++, you do that hash include the library, right? Similarly, in Python, you just have to do import and then the name of the library. So when I run this, I'll have all my functions that come under this library. So for example, I have just added 4 sentences in a list. We'll see what a list is. But just for the sake of it, you can just say that these are all 5 sentences. Okay. So as you can see, they are very different. This is an example. So this does not have any characters. Neither does this. This is just something random. This has numbers. This string is just numbers. So we'll do some particular operations on this. Okay. So now let's say I want to find sentences which has a particular word. Okay, so let's say I want to find all sentences with the word GitHub. So I just I just use a search command, right? So I just use the find all, and then I'll give you what to search for. So basically, this dot star means that anything can anything can come before the word GitHub, as well as anything can come after the word GitHub. So what I'm essentially trying to see is if the sentence contains the word GitHub, right? So if I run this, you can see the sentence which contains GitHub out in this list will be shown here. So let's say I want to see the word sentence, right? So now if I run this, you can see the sentence with the word sentence will be shown here. Now there might be a case that the word S is capitalized, right? So in that case, what I can do is I can just say to my compiler saying that okay, S can be small s or capital S. So as you can see here, when you give the 2 words in brackets, so it means that it can be either your lowercase s or an uppercase s. And then the compiler is intelligent enough to replace s with the lowercase as well as uppercase. So running this will give you 2 outputs, right? So this is quite simple enough, but to learn, there are a lot of powerful operations that you can do with regex. Okay, so for example, when you want to search a sentence which starts with a particular word, so how do I do that? I just start with my regex and then I just give an power operator. So this means that my sentence starts with my word that I want to search. And then as usual, I don't care about the words after something, right? So I just give dot star basically. So if I run this, you can see it is going to give you something random. Okay, so that is from here. So something random. Uh, okay, so if I do this, so now if I run this, so you're going to get something random for the testing. Okay, so similarly, if you want to find a sentence that ends with a particular word, right? So you just add a dollar symbol to the end of your word, and then I don't care about the words that are preceding my word, right? So I just added dot star before that. So similarly, run this. So as you can see, it didn't give any output because there was no sentence that was ending with random. So if I remove these extra words and then rerun this and then run this again, as you can see, it is going to give you something random here. Okay. So just one more thing. Let's say you want to find out all the sentences with numbers, right? So I can just give this command /d. It is going to spit out all the sentences with numbers in it. So it does not matter whether you have strings in it. All it matters is whether you have a single digit or not. So this is similar to your printf function. In printf, you just give %d, right? This is similar to that. So in regex, backslash means you forget about the word that is following this backslash. So it says that it is a keyword. So if you want to add a backslash to your search, you just have to give //. Okay. And let's say I want to find out the sentences that does not contain numbers, right? I just do this. Okay. So yeah. So we'll come to what conditional statements are in a bit, but you just get my point. So I am searching for sentences which contain a digit that is either 0 to 9, or you can use this /d. It doesn't matter. And then I see whether my sentence contains this or not. If it contains, I don't print it. If it does not contain, I print it. So it's like very simple. You just use the keyword not. Then we'll come back to this when we do conditional statements. Okay. So now you want to find out the location of the actual word. This is when you find you realize the power of regex. So I want to find out at which location my word blah exists, right? So what I do is I just do re.search. So basically, search is a function in my library regex, and then I want to search for the word blah, and then where do I want to search? I want to search it in the variable text. So if I run this, you can see my start of my word blah is at the 30th character and the end is at the 34th character. So it works character wise. Okay. So so for example, F is my 0th character, I is my first character, N is my second, so on. So this is where the power of regex actually you will realize. Okay. So now, as I said, these are all different data types. So you might not think that bool is a useful data type, but actually it's very useful. So it just stores two things. It just stores whether it's a number is true or a thing is a condition is false, right? So when we just try it out, you can see that you get the class bool. Although it does not store too much, this bool is a very useful data type. Okay. So before we move on, do you have any questions here? Feel free to ask. Okay, you can raise your hand and we can allow you to unmute and ask. Yes. Yeah, Abhiram, you can unmute now.
Sir, is the space also considered as a character in the location
Yes.
thing?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So
Thank you.
that is why. So if do you want me to count it out or something? So let's just search for the word space, right? So basically, it starts at the fourth location. So this is 0. This is I is 1, N is 2, D is 3, and then the word space is at fourth location, and it
Okay.
ends right after that. So it's fifth.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Right. So
Thank you.
any character that comes in your Unicode definition will be counted as a character here. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah. So just for the sake of analogy, we treat true as 1 and false as 0. Okay, it is kind of obvious. So you can apply your arithmetic operators on your Boolean data type also. Okay, so yeah, true plus. So we have put P is true and Q is false, right? So when you do true, 1 plus 0, it's 1, so on. So this is just an analogy to your Boolean and your integers. Okay. So now we come to the most useful data set of everything. So that is lists. So lists are nothing but collection of several variables. Okay. So you don't need to, so let's say you want to store 10 variables, 10 values. Okay. You don't have to declare 10 variables. You can just store all of them in a list. Okay. This is very convenient. And unlike C++ or Java, in Python, you can store multiple data types in the same list. So in C++, you have to predefine saying that, okay, this list contains only integers. But in Python, you don't have to do that. As you can see, we have integers, we have strings, we have Boolean also. So what happens when I run this? So it says that my list is this, the length of list, so that can be calculated using the function len is 7, and then my class is list. Okay, so Python allows you to mix data types, and suppose I want to access the first element of my list, right? So I would use L of 0. So most programming languages use the indexing starting at 0. That is very convenient because we like all the things are in binary, right? So the first number you would use is 0. So that is why the 0th element is actually the first element in the list. So similarly, the fourth element will be the fifth element in the list. So when I just run it, so as you can see, the first element is 0 and it is of data type int. My fourth element is my string A and it is of data type string, right? So basically, so in C++, you have to pass a number which is less than the length of your list as well as a positive number, right? In Python, can anyone guess what will happen if you pass a negative number to as an index? Does anyone want to guess what will happen? Yes, someone raise their hand. Okay, Vaibhav, go ahead.
Indexing will start from behind, I think I heard somewhere.
Yes. So can you tell me what will happen? Suppose, what if I put -1? Can you tell me what is the value that we printed from this list?
False.
Yes. So from the back, what happens is you start numbering from the negative side. So this is -1, this is -2, so on. So again, why you don't use 0 here is -0 doesn't make sense, of course. So when I put L of -3, you can see it is going to give me my third element from the back. So this is -1, this is -2, this is -3, right? So yeah. So now these are very basic like this is how you like access the elements stored in a string, stored in list. Sorry, these are all very basic operations, right? So suppose I want to copy a list. Okay, so this can be a useful operation that you might want to use. So what happens when we do that? So in Python, let's say you want to copy two variables. So I have my x is 5 and I want to store the value of x in y. Okay. So I can just put y equal to x, and then I can just print y. So what happens is whatever value that I store it in x is stored in y. So when I do print y, it actually prints the value of x. Okay. So yeah, this is called just like copying numbers, right? So what happens when we do that in a list? Okay, so you just define this list. So let's come to what range is in a while. So you just assume that A is a list which contains the numbers 1 through 10. Okay, so for example, I'll run it. Okay, so yeah, before I run that, you can just see. Okay, so you can just see that my list A contains the consecutive natural numbers 1 through 10. Similarly, my list B also contains the same, as I said, B equal to A. Now, suppose I want to change my fifth element of my list B. So I'll change it to 25, okay, for the sake. So now if I run this, can you see what happens? It also changes my fifth element of A. Okay, this is because when you do this B equal to A, it means that B is a symbolic link of your variable A. So when you change the value of some index in B, what happens is it changes the value in A. There is a symbolic link between the variables A and B. It is essentially like, okay, I have this variable A and I just want to call it B. You just call it B. That's it. You don't create a new variable which stores the contents of A. So how you do that is you run this A.copy. So this is when you actually create a different copy and store it in B. So for the same thing I'll run, instead of just B equal to A, I just put B equal to A.copy. Okay. So as you can see here, just the fifth value in B is changed to 25, whereas the value of A is still same, right? So this is because when you do just like just put B equal to A, this is just assigning. So this creates an in place function. So we'll come like that. You don't need to know that. What it does is it just creates a symbolic link between B and A, right? So there won't be two copies of the values stored here. It will still be the same copy. But when you do A.copy, it will create a new copy of the values that are stored in A, and then it will call it B. Okay. So these are all the things that you have to keep in mind when you copy a list. You don't want to edit your original list because you want to you want to preserve that for the sake. Okay. So when you do without knowing, if you just do B equal to A, and let's say you want to make some changes to the list B, and let's say you do this. Okay. So without unknowingly, you will also create a change in list A, which defeats the purpose of copying the list. So this is very important to do. And one more way you can do that is just call all the values that are stored in A. So you can just do square brackets and then put a colon between that. So what it does is it just calls all the values that is stored in A and then it stores in B. So this is similar to copy. Okay, so let's just try it out. So as you can see, this is very similar to copy. It is giving you the exact same thing. These two can be used interchangeably, right? And one more operator that you might want to use is reversing lists. Okay, so yeah, so the naive idea would be to create another list and then iterate through my elements in my list A, and then from the back I just store it in my another list, right? So in Python you have a very simple way to do that. So that is you just so as I said, right? So A single colon will copy the list. So now I copy the list and then I'm viewing the list in the backward sense, right? So my colon again -1 means that I'm viewing it in the opposite sense, right? So when I do this, you can see that my list B is actually the reverse of list A. So there are some benefits to do this over the normal for loop. That is because the code that is written in Python, right, it is properly vectorized. So it does not actually run for loop and then iterate through your list. It actually sees where the data is actually stored and then retrieves the data from there. So doing this is a lot faster than doing a normal for loop. Okay. So one more useful thing that you might want to do is when you have a list, okay, so you have random numbers, this doesn't make sense to you. And let's say you want to sort it out, in ascending order. So you can either do two things. One is you can just call sorted of L, which is going to give you a list which is sorted, or you can do L.sort. Okay. So again, the difference between these two is basically sorted of L will return a new list, whereas L.sort will sort the existing list. So when I print L from now, L will be the sorted version of the list L. But whereas sorted of L will return a new list which is independent of L. So this is like just copying the list and then sorting it out. So that is what this sorted operator essentially does. So you might understand the use of this. So I don't want to change my value that is stored in L. I still want to retain my data in the same order. But again, I want to check my maximum and minimum value or something. So then in that case, I would use this. Or you want to check the median or something. So in that case, I return a new list, which is the sorted of the old list. So this operation is very useful. Now, yeah, so suppose sorting in ascending order is boring, right? I want to sort it in descending order. So what you can do is, so this is the function to do that. So you pass sorted as well as a key, right? This key is actually an inline function, which is actually, what I'm essentially saying is, I take my value x, instead of x, I pass minus x, okay? So let's say you have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So if you add it in ascending order, you will get the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if I take the numbers, the negative of the numbers, I'll get -1, -2, -3, so on, right? So now if I take the ascending order of that, it will be like -5, -4, -3, so on, right? And then if I take the negative of that, I'll get my descending order. So that is what essentially I'm doing here. So basically I just take my numbers and then I just put the negative of that number, sort it in ascending order, and then take the negative of that number again, and then print it out. So I'll get my descending order, basically. Okay. So do you have any questions? No? Okay. So I think everything is clear, right? So we'll just move on. So now coming to the conditional statements. Okay, whatever we did till now, these are all basic things. But I don't want to do everything manually, right? I want to automate stuff. So that is where conditional statements come in. So we'll start with the basic if statement. So if is nothing but you just check if this is true or not. So if this is true, whatever code that you put inside your if statement is executed. And if this is false, it won't be executed. So for this case, I assign value 5 to A and 6 to B for the case, right? And then I just run this. So now clearly A is not equal to B, right? So whatever code that I put inside my if statement is not run, but A is not equal to B. So this value will return true. So since this is returning true, I'm just printing out 3 statements. So you can see that these are printed out. So now if I change A equal to 6, you can see that the first if statement is executed, whereas the second if statement is not executed. So yeah, this is I think kind of obvious. So we'll move on to a better conditional statement. So normally I just don't want to do one checking, right? I want to do multiple checking. So in that case, you have something called if else. So if true, you run this. If that is false, you run this. So this is very versatile. So if I put A equal to 5, B equal to 6, it says A not equal to 6. So let's say I change this to 6, right? So it is going to execute whichever thing that is given under the if statement. Similarly, what if I want to check multiple statements? So I want to check if A equal to B, or if A greater than B, or if A less than B. So I just use elif. So this is nothing but if and else together. So if this is true, run this. If else if this is true, run this, and so on. So if should be always followed by a condition. Similarly, elif also should be always followed by a condition. And for else, you need not give any condition. Okay, so if I run this, you can see A is less than B. So if I put 55 for the sake, you can see A is greater than B. Okay, so this is kind of obvious. So these are all very powerful. You might not see the power of this right now, but later on, when you run a very big piece of code and you don't want to do things manually, these conditional statements come very handy. Okay, now once again, I don't want to run everything manually, right? I want to do stuff automatic. Otherwise, there is no use for using programming languages. So now let's say I want to print welcome to GitHub's program for 6 times. So I can either do this. So this will do the trick, or I can either do this, right? So essentially what I am trying to do is, I am saying I have a number I which goes in the range 0 to 10. So I'll start with 0. I'll go to 9, and then after 9 I'll increase I. It will be 10, and then I won't be in this, right? So essentially that is what I'm doing here. So for I in range 10, I'm just printing out this value, welcome to GitHub campus program. Okay, so as you can see, it prints out this 10 times. So now if I want to do it 20 times, I can just change it here 20. Right. So I think this is quite obvious. As you can see, like printing it out manually 10 times is far more difficult than printing it out automatically. And let's say I want to I want to print the number of time I print. I can just print I comma. So as you can see, I starts with 0 and ends at 19. Right. So this is essentially what your for loop does in a high level. So there are different syntaxes. We'll just go through different things, right? So I want to start. So as you can see, I starts with 0 here, but I don't want to start with 0. I want to start with something else. Okay, so let's just print it out and check. So you can see I starts with 0, but I don't want to start with 0. Let's say I want to start with 55 or something. So you can use this. Okay, so I'll just say 55, and then I'll say 10, and then sorry, I'll say 65, and then I'll just say I want to increase by 1. Okay, so I can give 3 numbers. I can give A, I can give B, I can give C. So what happens is I start with A, so A less than or equal to I less than B, and then I increase I from I to I plus C. So that is what I'm doing here. So I start with 55, and then I increase I by 1. I go to 56, so on, till I reach 60. So let's say I put 2 here. So you can see 55, 57, 59, and then I stop when I reach 60. So this is what happens here. So now this also gives you the freedom to iterate backwards. Okay. So let's say I want to put 10 here, and then I'll put -5 here. So this is like very similar. This is mathematics. So it does not care whether you increase C is positive or C is negative. So all it cares is whether this condition is satisfied. Okay. So so when I do this, so as you can see, you get your numbers in reverse order. So this is also a very useful trick that you can use. Okay. So now, what is the fun if you can only run one for loop, right? So we want to run multiple for loops. So we can nest these for loops inside each other, and so what happens essentially happens is first this for loop will be executed, and for every I, this for loop will be executed. So as you can see here, for I equal to 1, my 1 value will be printed. Why? Because my j is running from I to I plus 1. So when I is equal to 1, I plus 1 will be 2. So my j will start with 1, and then it'll print 1, and then it'll go increment to 2, and then when the condition is checked here, j is not less than 2, right? So it exits, and then the next up, I will increase to 2, and then so j will be from 1 to 3, so on. So you get like a pyramid shape kind of, right? So this is very useful in case of large computations. Okay, so one more type of loop that you have is while loop. Okay, so this while loop is very simple. So I'll just do the operation till my condition becomes false. So here I just check if my value I is divisible by 10 or not. If it is not divisible, I just print I, and then I'll decrement I by -1. So let's see what happens. So as you can see here, I start with 49, I go till 41, and then whenever I print 41, I do 41 equal to I'll just decrement I by 1. So I'll get 40, and then when the condition is checked, so 40 mod 10 is 0. So this condition is no more valid. So I exit my while loop. So if I start with 50, let's see what happens. So nothing happens because the while loop does not even enter because the condition is not satisfied at the initial time itself, right? Okay, so just for the curiosity, we'll just see how long a normal function takes. So there is a library called time which tracks the time at which you start your code. So usually in C++, 10 to the power of 8 operation is 1 second. Let's see what 10 to the power of 8 operations is in Python. I just don't do anything. I just press continue. Okay. So I'm not doing anything. So let's see how much time it takes. So in C++, 10 to the power of 8 operations roughly is around 1 second. Whereas in Python, it's 4.87 seconds. So roughly Python is 5 times slower than C++. Okay. So keep in mind, Python is 5 times slower than C++. So this will come in handy when you have edge test cases in competitive programming, right? So yeah, we'll just move on to functions. So what is the fun if I have to write everything and I want to call something 10 times? Okay, so I can't just write 10 times, right? So that is where function comes in. So you just create a function. You start with define the name of function, whatever arguments that you want to pass in, and then you just create a colon and then indent it and then write the piece of code that you want to run when your function is called. So for example, here I just add a plus b. It's a very simple function. Okay. So basically, I'll just give you a brief example why you need functions. So I want to find if a number is prime or not. Okay. And I want to do it for all numbers that lie in the range 2 to 50. So you can just copy this and put it here. or you can create a function and then say whether the number is prime or not. So how do you find a number is prime or not? If a number is prime, it should not have any divisors less than that. So I'm just iterating through the numbers 2 to n, and then seeing whether the number I divides n or not. If it divides, then prime is false, and then I'm returning prime. So I'll just run these two, and then you can see this is going to print out all the prime numbers that is in the range 0 to 50. Sorry, 2 to 50. Okay. So now coming to inline functions. So these are all functions which you can define properly, right? So the only advantage with inline functions is inline functions don't need to necessarily create an object. So this is all these will all come in when you actually sit and time every single piece of line you write in your code. So this won't affect your day-to-day life, but when you want to optimize your code properly, you use inline functions. So you can also say that, okay, if I pass an argument to square, whatever argument that is x, I want to return x squared. So that is what I'm doing here essentially. So when I pass a, I take a, instead of a, I give a squared. So when I put a is equal to 4, I get 16. So the only advantage with inline function, as I told you, that it does not need to create an object. It uses the same object again and again. And so yeah, recurrent functions. So it's not like you can call the same. It's not like you can't call the same function inside the function. So let's say I want to do the factorial function, right? So let's say I want to do factorial of 20. So I'll just do factorial of n, and when n is 1, I'll just return 1. And then when n is not 1, I'll return n into factorial of n minus 1. This is the basic definition of factorial. So let's see what happens. So yeah, you can see factorial of 20 is this. So you can call functions instead of functions. Okay. So are there any doubts till now? Okay, please, we'll move on. So one more major thing that is advantage of Python is an object-oriented programming language. Okay. So basically a class is nothing but a blueprint of an object. So you have multiple data that you store in a class, which corresponds to what their object is. So each variable is actually an attribute of the class, and you also have different functions of the class, okay, and which we call methods. So now, for instance, we have the let's say I define a class called number, and this number I want to say that it has a value and it has a power. So basically, I'll have a number, let's say 5, and when the number 5 actually represents 5 into 10 power minus 3. Okay, so I'll just define this class. So basically, you have to have at least minimum of one function, that is an initialization function. So whenever you initialize the number, these are all the variables that it is going to store. Okay. So when I initialize number 466, what happens is it takes the value of 466, it stores it in the attribute self.value, and the power, which is a default argument, and which is 10 power minus 3. So default argument means I don't need to pass this argument. If I just don't pass it, it defaults to this value. So since I haven't passed any value here, it defaults to 10 power minus 3, and then my self.power is actually 10 power minus 3 here. And when I print this number, what happens is I print self.value into self.power. So this is a override. We call it override. So whenever you print a class, this is an override, and so print function takes an argument string, right? So only if you return a string, print function will be able to print. So here, that is what essentially we are doing. We are returning the string of the value self.value into self.power. And so whenever you want to, let's say you want to do some other operation, you want to update the value, you can just put self.update of value, right? So this is going to achieve that for you. Okay. So now this is pretty useless. I don't want to do this. Instead, I'll represent vector. Okay. So there's a library called math. So we'll just import that math. There are a lot of good functions that math has. So you can just go to the documentation and see what and all function math has. So for the sake of that, we'll define a class and call it coordinates. Okay. So the coordinates will have the x coordinate, the y coordinate, and then when I do coordinates.get, I'll return x coordinate as well as y coordinate. And then when I give up another point, it is going to give me the distance between those 2 points. Okay. So this is a very simple class I'm defining. And then I want to create another class, which is a vector, which has two things. One is a start and another is an end. And both start and end are coordinates. So as you can see, So basically, I just give you start and end tuple, and then it is going to give me a self.start, which is a coordinate class, and the self.end, which is a coordinate class again. So basically, whenever I initialize this, so I'm going to initialize two attributes, self.start and self.end. And let's say I want to get the magnitude of my vector. It's nothing but the distance between my start and the end, right? So here what happens is I just call the get distance, which is corresponding to my self.start object, and then I pass my self.end object. So this is going to find the distance between start and end. And orientation is nothing but your tan inverse of your slope, right? So basically, again, I'm just finding out my tan inverse of slope. That is the y2 minus y1 by x2 minus x1, right? So that's what essentially I'm calculating here. And then I'm finding the tan inverse and converting it into degrees. So these operations are pretty straightforward, but you can see the power, right? So I have an object start, and then I'm randomly accessing some attribute of this start. This is the method, and then I'm giving it some parameter, and then it is just returning me the distance between the start and end. So classes are quite powerful, and you can do multiple things with classes. So one disadvantage of Python classes is there is no public and private. So in C++, there are two different things, public, private, and one more thing is there. So what happens there is when you define a private method, the private method is accessible only inside your class. Unlike C++, Python, there's nothing called a private method. So whatever function that you define here, you can just use it everywhere. So that is what. So get distance is a method that I define inside my coordinates, and I'm able to use it everywhere, right? So yeah. So this is just your high level approach to your classes. Now, okay, so I just define this name. Okay, so this is a class. So usually names have first and last, and I define this. Now I have this student name. I have a student, and the student has a name, right? So I'll just say student of name, and I initialize my student with the first name, last name, and the grade. So and since I said that my student is inheriting from my class name, I want to initialize my class name also. So I'll just put name underscore underscore in it, and then give me my like arguments here. So as you can see, underscore underscore in it is a overriding function which initializes your object. So and I have another thing, grade. So these two functions you can see. So when I just say my student name is John Doe and he's in 8th grade. So when I do student get, I'm going to get name is John Doe, class is 8. Okay. So this is this is a very high level like introduction to inheritance, class inheritance. Okay. So now what about methods? So what if I print method? Okay. So I haven't given any print overriding here, right? So underscore underscore string is just for name. So I haven't given any print overridden for the class student. So let's see what happens when I print student. So it is going to print my it is going to print the function that I gave here. It is going to print the name of the student. So even the methods are inherited properly. So that is what I wanted to convey here. Okay. Similarly, you can have multiple class inheritance. I want to have my employee number and it is inheriting from the class name. So I just do this. So you can also initialize your like inherited function using the super. It like basically initializes all your dependent function classes. Okay. So yeah. So here you can just see it is essentially going to do the same thing. So instead of my grade, I have my ID, right? So yeah, this is like a class inheritance. Okay. So now coming to files. Okay. You operating with files is a very important task in any programming language. I don't usually have all my data stored as variables, right? I usually have it stored as a text. So what I do is I want to store, I want to create a file. I call it numbers.txt, and I want to write to that file, and then I want to address it as out file. Okay. So basically, this is what I do. I just run this, and then so what happens is I'm just running my file. I'm storing the value of line in my file. So what happens? So it's stored here, right? So if I open this, you can see the file which stores the numbers from 1 to 100. So this is how you write to a file. And let's say you have a file already, and I want to read it. So instead of this argument w, I part my argument r, and then I call it in file. So basically, this is what it is going to do. So I'm going to store all the values that is stored in my file. I'm going to store it in a list called lines. and then I go through my file, and then I append my list to here. So my list now has the files, the content that is stored in my file. So this is how you write to a file and read to a file in Python. Okay. So yeah, is there any questions till now? Okay, feel free to ask if you have any doubts. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, you can raise your hand if you have doubts, so that we can allow you to unmute. Okay, fine. So is it okay? Is it fine if we extend by a couple of minutes? We just have some more things to do. I thought this will be very useful for your like for your usage in Python. Python has a lot of libraries, I said, right? So we'll just go through a few libraries and then see how it goes. Okay. So one such library is a NumPy. NumPy is actually a computational library. So I'll import NumPy and then I'll call it NP. Okay. So what this does is it imports all the functions from NumPy, and instead of using NumPy always, I just call it NP. Okay, so I'll import this, and similar to Python, I just have my NumPy array. Okay, there are a lot of uses in NumPy array. I'll just let you know. So basically, I create a NumPy array and I store the value of all the functions, all the values that are stored in this list, right? So basically, X is a NumPy array, and usually this is how you store value. Usually, you store values in a NumPy array. And suppose I want to store the values of the numbers 0 to 100, I just store np.arange 100. So in normal Python, you do list equal to, some list A equal to list of range of 0, 100, 1. So this is how you do in normal Python. And in NumPy, you can just put np.arange. So these two will achieve the same operation. But NumPy is a different library, different data type altogether. We'll see why that is so. Okay. So for the example, for the same example, I just demonstrate y equal to. Okay. So both my y and x will contain the same thing. So you can just print x and c. So both of this will contain the same thing, the numbers from 0 to 99. Okay, but let's see what happens when I do when I want to add one number to every element of my array. Okay, so in NumPy you can just do x equal to x plus 1 and then see print. So you can see my numbers are from 1 to 100 now. But what happens when I do y? Right. So instead of x, I just put y. Okay, so as you can see, what happens? This is going to give you an error because this is not supported in your normal Python. So this is one advantage of using NumPy. Similarly, if you want to multiply all the elements by 2, you just do x equal to x into 2. So this is going to multiply every element in your NumPy array by 2. And if you want to multiply two arrays, so I have my numbers 1 to 10 and I have my numbers 1 to 10. Let's see what happens when I do multiplication of x into y. So what this is going to do is it is going to take element wise. So it is going to take my first element and then multiply with the first element of y. It's going to take my second element of x and it's going to take my second element of y and multiply it together. So that is why I get the squares. Okay. So this is not just normal matrix multiplication. So arrays are basically matrices, right? So this multiplying two arrays does not actually mean matrix multiplication. Okay. So this is just element wise multiplication. So you have other functions also. Let's say I want to create some angles that lie in the range 0 to pi. Okay. And I want to get 10 angles in that. So you can use this command linspace. Linspace is basically creating an array which has 10 elements between the numbers 0 and pi, and it creates uniformly. So I'll just put no. So you can see the print angles. So these are all the angles you get. These are all in radians. So now if you want to calculate the sign of these angles, I just put np.sign of angles. So I just pass it on, and then I'm going to get my angles, right? So sign of 0 is 0, sign of pi is 1. Sorry, sign of pi is also 0, and you have your tolerance, that is 10 to the power of minus 16. So usually in every programming language, you can in your integers you can store up to 15 bits. Okay, so 10 to the power of minus 16 essentially means 0. So there is no precision. These are some random bit precision. So this essentially means 0. Okay. So similarly, I can apply my cos of my angle. So it is just the same thing. Okay. So what here happens is I take my array and I apply this sign element wise. Similarly, I apply cost element wise. This you can't achieve when you use normal lists. This is a very good feature of NumPy. And for the sake, let's say you want to create some 100 random numbers. I just use this. I use np.random.rand, and then this will give me 100 random numbers between the values 0 and 1. So can someone tell how to get the value between any A and B? It'll be great if someone can unmute and tell me how to get the value between A and B. Yes, someone unmuted. Yes. Sorry. Okay, okay, you can raise your hand and then we can unmute you for the answering part. Yes, Shubh. Please go ahead. Shubh, you can unmute now.
You can multiply it with the number.
Okay. Okay, sure. So that is essentially what we'll be doing. So let's say I want to create I want to create numbers between 0 and 10. Okay. So I just multiply with 10. That's it. And then if I want to create numbers between 10 and 11, I just add 1. So the sorry, 0 and 11. This is what is going to do. So you will create basically numbers between A and B, basically here, right? So yeah. So one more thing is you can create multiple. You can create 2D arrays, 3D arrays, so on. So this is something like I want to arrange my values from 0 to 14, and I want to shape it as 3 into 5. So my number of rows is 3 and my number of columns is 5. So this is like a 3 into 5 matrix. So this is what is going to give you when you do reshape.3, 5. Similarly, as I said, right, your NumPy array multiplication is not matrix operations. So how do you find matrix how do you do matrix operations? So okay, so np.identity is going to give you an identity matrix, and now I'll just create a random 3 by 3 matrix. Okay, so if I do a into I, what it is going to do is it is going to do element wise multiplication. So you see this value I1, and then it multiplies with this, and it gives me a value this. If you take the second value 0, it multiplies 0 with this, and it gives me 0. So this is not I want to do. I want to do matrix multiplication, right? So how you do that is there is a separate function matmul. So basically you pass in two matrices of the same size, or let's say you have size A into B and B into C. So you can your output of your matmul will be B cross C, right? So A cross C, sorry. So if I do this, so now it is doing what you expect, matrix multiplication. So keep in mind, A into Y is element-wise multiplication, whereas matmul is your normal matrix multiplication. Similarly, you have your transpose of a matrix. I think this is all straightforward. And you have your inverse of a matrix. And you can also check if it is actually computing the inverse correctly. So matrix multiplication of your A and A inverse, it is giving you all these values. So as I said here, the precision for floating pointer is usually 15 digits. So when you have 10 power minus 17, it essentially means 0. Okay. So if you want to find out the rank of a matrix, or you want to find out the rank of zeros, so basically you have all these matrix operations in your NumPy, and you want to determine the determinant of a matrix, you can do that as well. Okay, great. So now all these values are very tough to see right here. So we want to visualize these values most of the time. So we have this function. We have this library called matplotlib, and there is a function called pyplot. So let's say I want to visualize e to the power of x for values from 0 to 1, and I want to visualize the 1000 values. Okay, so let's say I do this. So what happens is I create a graph which contains the values e to the power of x for x from 0 to 1. So this is very useful when you want to visualize data. Similarly, you can do multiple things. So this is just some random plotting. So I am plotting random numbers. So every time you do, you get a different distribution. And this is, you just see this. No? This is like a normal histogram. So I have a normal distribution here. So all these are different plotting methods that you can use. And this is just like, I'm just calculating sine of x squared. And then I want to plot this multiple things. So this is like vertically stacked plots. I can plot these like two plots in horizontal next to each other, or you can even plot multiple plots together. So these are all things that you can do with NumPy. Okay. And yeah, so one more thing is I showed you how you can open text files, right, or any number files. So what if you want to open some images? So you have this PIL. Okay, basically this PIL, what it does is it just opens an image and you can use matplotlib to show this image. So this is so I just downloaded this image and I'm just opening it using PIL, and then I'm using matplotlib to show this image. So matplotlib is very versatile in this case. Okay, so like one more library. So this is a very good library called Pandas. This we use for data computation. So this is extensively used in NLP and data science, right? So what we use here is I'm just creating a random list here. So just give it a second. So it's like creating a table basically. This table is containing the random data, and I just want to visualize the first 5 values of the random data. So this is what this essentially does. Right. So this is a very good way to visualize data, and it's also a data type. So you can do multiple things with that. So if you want to find out the last 5 values, you can do df.tail. Or if you want to find out first 15 values, I can just pass 15 here. This is going to print me first 15 values of my data type. And so since this is a this is a data type, right? So I can do multiple operations here. So I want to do column 1, and I want instead of my column instead of this random text, I want to replace this with the number of length of this list, right? So I'll just do this. So this is again an inline function. Instead of x, I replace x with length of x, right? So you have df.net that is going to give me the length of my string instead of the string itself. Okay. Similarly, you can also add new columns. So it's as simple as adding column 3 equal to column 2. And then if I do this, this is going to add another column, and you can access only the column 1 using just accessing the column 1. This is going to give you the index as well as the value that is stored in this. And if you want to access the rows, you can use this ilog, right? So this ilog is going to give you rows basically. Yeah. So now we are at the end of this session. So I just want to say a few more things, right? So all these libraries that I showed you, Python, NumPy, Pandas, right? What are the major benefits of this? So these are all vectorized. So that means normal for loops in Python, I just showed you, right? It's 5 times slower than your C++. That is not acceptable in most cases. It is going to be too slow for you. But whereas NumPy has an integration with C++. So all the codes that you run on NumPy is actually runs on a C++ kernel, and it gets translated to Python script, and then you are able to view it. So running anything on NumPy is actually faster than running it on native Python. And similarly, Pandas. So all these columns, all these operations I'm doing, right? So what it does not actually do it manually. It just replicates the data that is stored in your actual memory. So what it does is it just gives you a link between the place that the column 2 data is stored and the place that column 3 data is stored. So the actually does not iterate through your entire data frame and then copies it. So these are all done in an optimized manner such that these are much faster than your normal for loops could be run. Okay, so that yeah. So we'll take some questions if you have any. Otherwise, I think we can quit it. Okay. So if you have any questions, we'll take it right now. You can raise your hand and we'll allow you to unmute yourself and you can ask a question. Yes. Yes, Vijay Lakshmi. Go ahead.
Can you tell me about the features involved in scikit library?
Yes. So scikit is actually ML oriented library, right? So you have your machine learning code such as, so for example, I'll give you 2 random examples. So you have your linear regression and linear classification, right? So these two are actually quite mathematically intensive. You don't want to code it every time. Again, as I said, for loops are very slow in Python, right? So what the scikit library entails is it contains vectorized codes of these very useful architectures like linear regression and linear classification, where if you just pass your data, it is going to do everything for you and it is going to give you your output, just your output. So you don't have to code anything. So scikit contains all those things as well. And you also have multiple scientific things. So you have your differential equation solver, you have normal integrations, you have multiple scientific things also in Scikit. So you can just go to Scikit's documentation page and then see what and all function it has. So Scikit also has an image module which has multiple functionality compared to PAL or OpenCV. So there are multiple things in Scikit. So it's a very versatile thing to do. Basically anything that is related to science or mathematics. It has a very good differential equation solver, and multiple other mathematical architectures also. Anything else you want to know about Scikit?
Thank you so much. I will look into it.
Okay. Anyone else want to ask something? Yes, Vaibhav. Yep, you can unmute now.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt, but can I get access to this notebook?
Yes. This notebook will share it to you through the mail ID.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that.
Sure. Yeah, so basically I forgot to mention this, right? So all this code that we run is run on Google Colab. Google Colab is nothing but Jupyter notebook, right? So Python, as I said, is an interpreted language. You don't have to compile your code before you run it. So that is why Python, actually you can run it on Jupyter notebooks where each cell is executed separately. So when I execute this cell, it does not affect the other cells. So yeah, this is a very good thing to know about this. And Jupyter notebooks you can run natively on your laptop as well. Colab is much simpler because you can collaborate with many people. So you can make edits to the same file and you can run it on multiple devices. And Colab also gives access to a GPU in case you need. It gives you 3 hours of free GPU every day. So yeah, so you make use of Colab if you are unfamiliar with anything else. If you don't want to install Python in your laptop, you can use Colab straight away. You can just head on to collab.google.com and then use straight away. Right? Anything else? Okay.